Oh, oh.
Hi everyone, welcome to Stories from the Porch. This is our sixth summer, hosting storytelling on our front porch. Tonight we have Michael Clarkson, local author, journalist, all around fabulous guy, talking about coping with anxiety and fear. On to you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Will. Nice to be back, isn't it? COVID. Wow. Well, fear and stress. Actually, I think we've been pretty good with COVID. You told me a year and a half ago, the world was going to shut down from a pandemic. I would have wondered how we cope with it, but we survived. I know we've got problems. We've got people who don't want to get vaccinated. That's their choice, but it's more complicated than that. But we'll talk a little more about COVID later. But yeah, coping with fear and stress. Usually, by the way, I guess good to get it. I usually have a big screen here and all my PowerPoint's going.
Oh yeah.
So I just copied my notes.
We're on a budget this year, Michael.
I was until 1988 a general assignment reporter at Standard, covered cops and investigative stuff. And one day I covered a coroner's inquest. It was sadly about a teacher. He had a lot of issues. He wanted death by cops. So he holed himself up in his house in Thorold. And sure enough, the police killed him in a shootout. So I went to cover the inquest. And that kind of changed the direction of my career, because when I went there, the cops got up on the witness stand and said the shooter came out of the house, and the whole thing seemed to happen in slow motion. He seemed to turn around slowly and fire at them. And it seemed like they had more room and time to return the fire. But then independent witnesses got up and said, what are they talking about? The whole thing happened, just bang, bang, bang. So an OPP psychologist got up and he qualified the story. He clarified the story, saying that what happened to the cops was their fight or flight system was going crazy, because here's this guy pointing a gun at them, and their hormones, their adrenaline, their dopamine were shooting through their body, and they seem to have more room and time because it's a condition called tachypsychia. When your life is threatened, your body goes through a series of changes. And I found this with accident victims. Some accident victims tell me that the car has been rolling over and they can see the ashtray going in slow motion. Well, it's their fight or flight system. It's their body, their brain, their hormones reacting to try to give somebody more room and time, it seems, when their life is threatened. So, wow, what a story. I went back to the office. I got a story here. I'd never heard this before. But then I started thinking long-term effects. What if we could bottle that, this so-called tachypsychia, if we could bottle that and use it for not only life-threatening situations, but deadline pressures, challenges we have, wow, that'd be something. So for the next 5 or 10 years, I started looking at that, and I started studying fear, because that's where it came from originally. The cops their lives were threatened, they were in a fearful situation, so I started studying fear. And I was shocked by what I found out. Things I should have noticed. Now, some of you guys, I haven't talked about this before here, but 3 years ago I talked about my career. So some of you guys may have heard one or two of these stories, but hopefully they fit into a tighter context about fear and stress. So I started studying about fear and stress, and some of these things I found out just, why didn't I know them? The baseline stuff I should have known. All physical stress, I think, all manifestation of stress, anxiety, is what I call fear energy. It's your body reacting to a stressful situation. Number two, when your fingers shake, anybody have an idea why your fingers shake? What the physiological reason for that is? Your body knows two things in fight or flight. It's to fight or run away. And when you really start to shake, the blood leaves your small muscles to go to your big muscles to fight or run away. Same with your legs and feet. So I covered the PGA Tour for the Toronto Star later on. And even the golfers didn't know what the reason was when they're doing an important putt, when it started to shake. Well, it's your blood is leaving your small muscles. And in golf, that's about the last thing you want. You don't want to fight anybody. Although we're going to talk about what happened in the golf tournament yesterday, sort of relate to that. We'll get to that later on. Anyway, the reason, the way you get the fingers going again, the blood back in, you go like this. That brings your blood back into your fingers. Number 3, and this really floored me when I found this out. The average person has 66,000 thoughts a day. There's nothing more we do than think a day. And 2/3 of them are negative. 2/3 of them are so-called worries. And only 8% of these worries are legitimate things we can do something about. So, wow. As soon as I found that out, I thought, I'm going to try to ditch a lot of this junk I have upstairs because it's not doing me any good. It's counterproductive. The good news I found out was that fear can really be our number one resource. It was in the case of the cops. It is in the case of if you're living in Toronto, you don't want to walk across the 401. Fear is there to help you if we use it right. The next thing that really shook me was that the number one worry we have today, well, there's actually 2 of them. Surveys come back and people say the number one fear they have is either death or it's worry about what other people think about them. In fact, I think that, it's called allodoxophobia, I think that's the number one fear. And Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, said, if that's the case, that you're more worried about what people think than you are of dying, if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket giving a eulogy, which is, of course, fear of public speaking. And the last thing that really struck me was, I think, that the biggest way to cope with our fear and our stress is awareness. Aware of what's going on in our bodies. Once we're aware of that, we're in a position to do something about it. We don't necessarily do something about it, but at least we're aware of it. I'm aware of that stuff, so here we go. The more I studied about tachypsychia, the more I realized that is what I call emergency fear. Fight or flight, when you react to something right away, a rat's coming at you, your fight or flight system kicks in. You become a different person under pressure. Your chemicals change. I call that really emergency fear. Something happens quickly, knee-jerk reaction, emergency fear or arousal. I know my wife Jennifer got tired of hearing this. She says, arousal. Michael, stop talking about arousal all the time. It's not your birthday to get away from me. Can I still use that joke today? I used it 10 years ago. I'm not sure if I can still use it. I got a bit of lukewarm laughter, so I've got to, yeah. We're living in politically correct times, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of the segment today. I'm going to talk about a new book, which is about how to get the Democrats and Republicans together in the United States, and that's going to be a big one. But anyway, that's got to do with fear and Trump as well. Emergency fear or arousal, we become different people. That's number one. There's two other ways we fear. One is worry. We lay awake at night worrying about things, long-term thing. And the third type of fear, I think, is specific fears or phobias. Fear of public speaking is what I'm doing, like now, glossophobia. Lots of fears, lots of phobias out there. I've got plenty myself. And actually, I think on the horizon, there's a number 4 segment of fear, what's not been studied properly, and that's anxiety. I think anxiety is kind of a free-flowing fear. We're not exactly what we're worried about, but we know it's there, we feel tension, and so I think that's down the road. I think psychologists, biochemists will study that more in depth. Okay, let's talk more about emergency fear or fight or flight. I have my big screen here. You see this caveman's response to fear, and we still respond the same way we did 150,000 years ago. Our body, our fight or flight system does not know the difference between the challenges we're telling it. Okay, we may be able to mend them. The rat coming here is not a 5 out of 5. It's not the cops having to shoot somebody. So athletes have like a 3 out of 5 response when they're choking under pressure, blah, blah, blah. But your body goes through a whole series of changes. And we have a fight or flight response, believe it or not, 35 to 40 times a day, mostly in small little increments. We may have a phone call in the middle of the night. That's pretty big. Phone call in the middle of the night, it could be a son or a grandson in trouble, so you may react at 4 out of 5. You may be tense. When you go through fight or flight, things happen like the body burns fuel faster, muscles have increased activity. I talk about the blood leaving the small muscles to fight or run away. Many systems, such as the digestive tract, shut down. When I'm doing a big corporate talk, usually it's before a dinner or a lunch, and I always say I don't want the lunch or dinner because when I'm nervous, my digestive system shuts down. Everything in your body, if you're really scared, will shut down except what you need to do. That's pretty important. Concentration can be better, like the cops. That doesn't happen all the time. A lot of guys with guns and somebody shooting at them, they'll choke under pressure. But those cops, we'll talk about that later, they were able to manipulate their hormones and actually help their hormone to help their concentration, whereas most people actually sadly choke under pressure. Athletes do that all the time. Heart rate and breathing speed up, etc., etc. I think we all know that to a degree, but as I said, we still have the same fight or flight system, so we're kind of sophisticated animals. There's a lot of things about us what are animalistic. We don't have the same instincts anymore as a lot of animals because we sort of, our society, our safety nets, all this stuff has sort of released our instincts. In fact, I'm sure you know that we still have maternal and paternal instincts, but there's not a lot left. I mean, don't you have to sometimes slap a kid when he comes out?
No.
Maybe you don't have to slap them. They're crying already.
No, not always. But you don't slap them.
Okay.
That's that. I don't know if that was a thing that they did previously, or if that's just a movie thing. But it's stimulating. It's usually like rubbing their back, rubbing their feet. But
they won't breathe. I guess my point was, maybe if they weren't breathing, they would, in the old days, they would slap the baby on the bum or something.
Well, I think it's yes, and now what they do is they stimulate them by rubbing their back or rubbing their feet vigorously.
Okay. I picked a bad example initially.
It's just I've never seen it done. It's not in use anymore. Whether it ever was in use or if it was just.
I think that's what happened to me.
I don't know.
And I had some birthday shoot. Maybe that's what. The evolution of worry. Okay. Well, caveman's worries. There's a reason that fight or flight is still going. Caveman's worries were a lot different than ours. What did they have to worry about? They have to worry about fire. They didn't invent fire. They were afraid of fire in the beginning. Then they're afraid of other tribes. They're afraid of predators, mastodons, whatever, mountain lions. So the fight or flight system then was good. It helped them get through things. We've gone through a whole series of changes. We have social safety nets. Our government there supposedly is to protect us. And we really don't have to worry about animals anymore. I mean, we're slower and less strong than a lot of animals are, but we're organized. The reason we've taken over the world is we're organized together, and we've got guns, and we band together, so we don't have to worry about those things. Our challenges now are more social, they're more professional, they're more relationship oriented. So we have a much more complex society than caveman, but we still got this stress emergency fear system we have to deal with. And rather than caveman, we sometimes have what I call phony wars. We go to war now for different things than we did. We have got a whole series of changes, a whole series of fears that cavemen didn't have. We now fear change. I do a long talk about coping with change, and that's a big thing. And that's why I think we've done pretty well with COVID. I think we've made a lot of pretty good adjustments to things like COVID. So I think there's hope for us going along. We can adapt to the challenges we have now. Fear of confrontation and conflict, that's common. Fear of terrorism, very real. Fear of not being part of a team. Fear of success or happiness. Fear of getting a compliment. I think that's probably a Canadian one, right? Sometimes we can accept criticism before we can. You're laughing, but you're kind of quasi in between there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just sit on the fence there.
Okay. Fear and stress in pets. Look at that. Looks like one of your two dogs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Pets have a lot of the same fears we do. I go to my vet and I say, what do I do? Sometimes you give your dog aspirins. It seems to work. Or Sinutab. When they're having a lot of... I had a terrier with part pug, and she was always having allergies and stuff, and when it was peak season, I would give her antihistamines, and they worked. So watch out for your pets. A lot of times they can't talk to us, but sometimes they have the same stress when you leave home and that, empty nest, all that stuff. Fear of flying, fear of downsizing, fear of retirement, fear of saying no. I think women have still that. I'm not talking about the bedroom. I'm talking about since women have gone more out to the workforce, men have done more housework. They do studies and they do, but still, I don't know why, women still have a fear of saying no. I think women still do the lion's share of, except for watering the plants, right?
I watered the plants.
Okay.
They're just crappy plants this year.
Okay, blame the plant.
I blame the plant.
You know what I'm saying? Women sometimes have to say no. Look, I'm working. I've got the kids, the grandkids. It's up to you to do a little more than the housework. So,
No.
what's that?
No.
You heard that one, Patrick. See, here's when he has to. Okay. Okay, when we talk about stress and worry, we got to talk about the brain. I think the brain is the ultimate computer. Everything is processed through this brain. The challenges, the stresses we have are processed through our brain, and it's telling our body, our fight or flight system, what to do about it. I think the brain is the ultimate computer. I really don't think we have a computer yet what marvels the brain. We just don't understand the brain yet. I think the brain is the source of our greatest achievements, Albert Einstein, etc., but it can also be the source of our greatest failures. We still sometimes can't forget what that neighbor said about us 2 weeks ago, and we still worry about that. So the brain is a tremendous source, but it can be a negative source. Talking about the brain and the thoughts again. Here's our daily routine. Our daily routine, what we do most in the course of a day. We touch our face, believe it or not, Patrick, 3,000 times a day, because he's doing it right now. 1, 2, 3. You got it. 3,000 times a day we touch our face. That's a lot. They've done studies, and men speak 13,000 words a day, and women speak 20,000 words a day. You guys,
have to repeat everything.
there we go. I gave this talk in Montreal, and I said that. A woman stood up in French and said, "That's because we have to repeat everything." That's a good one. Yeah. Again, back to the 66,000 thoughts. There's nothing we do more than think. Every day, 66,000 times, 44,000 are worries. Talked about the complex society already. No wonder we think so much and worry so much. We don't have to worry about fire or the mastodon around the corner. Here's the problem with worry. Here's worry's physical cost. I call it friendly fire. When we get stress and anxiety because of worry, it's like in the Army, when you're in friendly fire. Red Hill Senior was in the battle in France, and the mustard gas blew back in the Canadians' faces, and they died. I call that friendly fire. We're doing friendly fire every day with worrying too much, because it's making our cortisol drip all the time. It's making our immune system not. We get a lot of worries. We get a lot of colds, and we get more flu because our immune system gets down when we get the so-called cortisol drip from worrying all the time. Here's the worry's physical cost. Friendly fire, as I call it. Depression, anxiety, irritability, overeating, smoking, alcohol, and drug abuse. The cortisol drip, as I mentioned, can affect your immune system. $4 billion annually in North American worker absenteeism from stress, all about worry. It makes us feel vulnerable. It keeps people from realizing their dreams in many areas. There's a lot of people like me. Most people, I think, somehow can speak. They're worth a book. For one reason or another, most people don't realize their dreams. That's very sad. And a lot of times that's simply worry. They're worried about what other people think. If they take a risk, do some speaking, write a book, write a story. Right, Stephanie? You know all about that.
Absolutely.
Here's a big one. Fear in the mainstream media. Well, I don't know what the mainstream media is anymore, but I was a part of it for 37 years. The mainstream media has really has an effect on our worry system, doesn't it? When we overwatch media, overlisten to media, the antisocial media, as I call it, too much, it can affect the way we think, affect the way we make decisions. And to my mind, the mainstream media changed when the O.J. Simpson trial happened in the mid-1990s. Until that happened, the mainstream media, I think, was like the Walter Cronkites, the balanced reporters we could trust, and they would deal mainly in the facts. And the O.J. Simpson stories, the tabloid stories, were the campaigns of the Toronto Suns, the tabloids. We have some late arrivals here, or?
I don't know. I think they're just walking back.
Sadly, the mainstream media is now in the tabloid business. So, due to a number of reasons, even people like the Toronto Star, which I work for, and I still respect the Toronto Star. My mother-in-law used to say in Fort Erie, "How can you live in Toronto? There's a murder there every day." Well, that's almost true, because in Toronto, you got in the GTA, you're like 5.5 million people. Fort Erie is a small little place. You don't get many murders. The problem was she watches the Toronto news. So yeah, there's a murder pretty much every day, but there's no follow-up. There's no broad story about why these murders are happening. So you're only getting part of the story. And I lived in downtown Toronto, and the only time I ever had a problem was I got my windshield smashed out when I was on the Parkway in Fort Erie. I've been in Toronto 15 years. I never had a problem with crime at all. The problem with the mainstream media is they don't tell you that whole story, that Toronto has actually got a low, serious crime rate. How the mainstream media affects you is you don't want to send your kids to the playground anymore because you're afraid what's going to happen. Now, in between then and now, of course, we got the social media, and you've got the whole scenario about predators on social media. Maybe they know where you live, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So it's even more complex now than it was. But my point is that the mainstream media has gotten more tabloid. They may not give you the news as you used to get it. I'm not sure how you can trust it anymore. And I certainly can't trust the social media. And the only good thing I think what came out of Donald Trump, and there goes I'm left. I've always been left leaning. Donald Trump was the guy who brought two things together: fear and the social media, Twitter and Facebook. He exploited the hell out of that. So suddenly there's these millions of people supporting him. I didn't know they were there before. That they just didn't come out of the woodwork. I think they were always there, but the social media gave them a platform and a rallying point. Oh my God, there's all these other people who think like me, militia guys, etc. I mean, I'm using extremes here, but Donald Trump used Twitter and Facebook and other social media to exploit that, to bring these people together and play to their fears. It worked. Sadly, it worked. How many people voted for him? 70 million people. I'm not saying all these people are bad people. There's some policies. Obviously, they agree with him. But I guess my point is that worst case scenario, I think we should at least applaud this guy for pointing this out, how powerful fear is as a motivator, much more powerful than love, sadly, or community-oriented, being part of an organization for public good. Fear motivates people, and how do you get on there? I don't know how many people I've had to defriend on Facebook, and I hate to do that. I gladly still have some right-wing friends on Facebook who are not extreme. But until Facebook and the social media came along, wow, some of my friends cutting and pasting what I think are non-stories. Talk about confirmation bias. We could have a whole speech on confirmation bias, how people go to stories which confirm their original belief, and that just accelerates things, and I'll talk about it in a little while. Anyway, social media, everybody's a publisher. Niagara Falls Review, St. Catharines Standard, Welland Tribune, they don't even have a building anymore. There's no building in Niagara region for a newspaper reporter to go to. They're all working from home. They're all geared down. When I worked at the Standard, there were 15 or 20 reporters, most of them general assignment. Now there's, like, for the whole Niagara region, like 3 or 4. So you're not going to get the news like you did. And you're going to have to go to social media. Even then, you're not going to get the news. Today we found out a woman was charged in the shootings of those 2 women on the Parkway in Chippewa. Well, this has been, like, I don't know, 9 months, a year later. In the old days, we had 20 reporters. We get that story somehow. So I'm not blaming it. That's a whole other story, is how corporate media have just ruined local media, ruined local stories. So you've got to pick and choose really what media you're going to pay attention to and try to make your own decisions. Me, since Trump was out, I don't even watch the news anymore. That sounds crazy. I spent half my life in the mainstream media, but that's for your own decision. But I would say don't become a news junkie, because there's a lot of crap out there. I'm probably taking more time than I'm going to take, because I'm not even 1/10 of the way through this. Individual factors for worry. Here's an important thing. We're not all the same. When it comes to worry, we all react to things in a different way. My point here is, don't judge other people if they react to challenges not the way you react. One of the ways is when we talk about computers, let's talk in terms of software. Our software environment in our brain. Nature, nurture. I played a lot of sports. I broke a finger. I went to St. Mike's Hospital for therapy. And my therapist, I said, what are you afraid of? She said, I'm afraid of hummingbirds. What? Hummingbirds? How can you be afraid of hummingbirds? Where did that come from? I don't know. She said, but my sisters are afraid of hummingbirds. And my mother's afraid of hummingbirds. How did that come about? Well, apparently something happened with a hummingbird one day with my mother, and she was terrified of them. The way it came right to her. So the daughters saw the way the mother reacted to the mother and the hummingbird, so they became afraid of hummingbirds. So that's what I call software environment. And so I'm not judging anybody for being afraid of a hummingbird because there's a reason for it. Trauma is another individual factor for worry. If you've gone through a traumatic event, when that event seems to recur, of course you're going to react differently. You're going to have more extreme reaction. Hard drive genetics. It's going to come into play when I talk about conservatives later on. Conservatives have different brains than liberals, believe it or not. There's much more to the way we react liberally, conservatively, than just nature and or nurture. They all fit in. But they've done studies about conservatives' brains and I always mispronounce this, amygdala. It's a part of the brain what reacts to fight or flight, what reacts to challenges. And with conservatives, the amygdala reacts differently the way they process fight or flight than the way liberals do. Conservatives generally tend to want to be safe. They overreact to fight or flight. So that leads them to want to be safe and like the military generally more than the liberals. That's just the one example. But so let's not judge if we're liberal. I'm wearing a pink shirt. I guess I'm probably left-leaning. Let's not judge conservatives. That's maybe only one reason. Upbringing is obviously another big reason. United Church people bring up United Church people. Atheists bring up atheists. Blah, blah, blah. We're part of nature, nurture. We're all different. Another hard drive genetic is that maybe 20 years ago, not that long ago, scientists discovered we all have a gene for serotonin. We call it the worry gene. So if that rat comes along, I'll react differently to that than you might because I have a worry gene which has more serotonin in it. Now serotonin, when we feel fear, it pumps out serotonin is a soothing hormone and it calms us down. And in this gene is bigger in some people than it is in others. So I'm more likely, if I have a bigger serotonin gene, to react calmer under pressure and worried than other people. And as soon as I heard that, I stopped judging my mother-in-law because she worries about every little thing. So that was a wake-up call for me that we're all put together differently. So I'm not going to judge anybody if they react differently to stressful situations than I do. We're all different. Strategies for worry. How are we doing for time, Kelly? Or did I say Kelly?
8 minutes.
We're 20, how many? 28 minutes in.
Okay. I think there's 4 different strategies for us when we talk about how do we affect our worry management? How do we worry less? And it's going to be worry's background we're going to talk about. We're going to seek a healthy lifestyle and an original hard drive. We're going to put worries in perspective. And we actually, with stress, we can use worry, or we can diffuse it, or we can actually use it. Remember how I talked about the cops used it for better focusing. Seeking a healthy lifestyle of mind. Once we do that, I think when we come up against worrisome situations, we're more apt to deal with it better. In other words, if our diet is good, we get a lot of sleep, we get a lot of exercise, and these stressful situations come up, we're less likely to blow a gasket. And in general, I say that life is 20% what happens to us and 80% how we react to it. Unfortunately, a lot of other people think it's the reverse. They think life is 80% what happens to you and 20% how you react to it. So they're not going to react well to it. Finding an escape is a big thing with worry. If I get stressed out, with COVID, I've lost quite a bit of my freelance markets. Everybody's cut back. So I've had to find an escape, and what I do, some of you are my friends on Facebook, I build a fort in my backyard. So I go back there for escape. I hang around with the possums and the coyote. Well, actually, I kick the coyotes off the property, but I find it's a good escape. Not everybody's got a backyard to build a fort in, but I think you guys have escapes, maybe, I don't know, music, exercise. Everybody's got an individual thing where they can escape the day-to-day grind. Okay, I talked earlier about fear of what other people think, allodoxophobia. That's the term for it. And I talked about Jerry Seinfeld, and if you're more worried about what people think than death, then you're going to be in the casket. But fear of other people's opinions. There's even a subconscious element to this. We may not even be aware that we worry about what other people think of us. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we sometimes dress for other people. I mean, if I wasn't talking here tonight, I may be in my pajamas. So I'm a little bit worried about what you people think about me. I want you to go home and have a good opinion of me. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as I don't seek your validation for my life. If you seek too much approval, everything okay, Shelley?
Oh yeah, I heard a squeak and it sounded like the brakes on my bike.
Ooh.
And I knew the shed was open, so I just wanted to.
You're the security here, right? Okay, good.
Head of security.
All right. We change our behavior for others. We dress for other people. We do. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we keep it in perspective. Joggers speed up when other people are watching. Now that's pretty baseline stuff. Okay? I think we all do it. There's nothing wrong with that. We want to please other people. It's good for motivation to a point. And if you talk about this as an ego thing, our ego defenses and nervous system never shut off. You ever wake up from a nightmare and your fight or flight system kicked in? You're sweating, you're anxious, so it never kicks off. Drawbacks of allodoxophobia, fear of other people's opinions. The drawbacks are living for other people's agendas. We don't want to do that. We can't do that. It makes us avoid life's challenges. It can even, in extreme cases, kill us. It happened to my dad. My dad had agoraphobia, fear of leaving home. He was a functional one because he went to work for the Niagara Parks Commission every day, but he was very shy. He was a carpenter. He stayed in his van most of the time. He had a fear of other people's opinions to the point that he did not want to go to my son's wedding, his own grandson's wedding. He kept coming up with excuses. He didn't want to be in a room with all these people. I didn't judge him for it. I found out about all these things. But his last excuse was he didn't have a suit to go to the wedding. So the wedding was in Toronto. I came down to Fort Erie. I brought him a suit jacket. Here you go, Dad. I shouldn't have pushed it on him. You got a suit jacket now. You can go to Paul's wedding. Okay. Went home. About 8 hours later, he was dead. Died of a heart attack. So I rushed back, and the suit jacket was still on the chair where I put it. And I said to my mother, was he fretting all night, worried about the wedding? She said, yeah, he was. Now, he had some underlying conditions. And I think he probably had a weak heart at that point. So I'm not saying the allodoxophobia killed him, but I think it was one of the components what sent him over the top. So I know it's an extreme example, but there are people who worry so much about what other people think that it causes a lot of stress and worry in their lives. There are people, though, who find ways to use allodoxophobia. And one of them, he just won the Oscar last year, was Anthony Hopkins. Remember he played that serial killer, Hannibal? He won the Oscar last year. Here's what he said about allodoxophobia. I wanted revenge. I wanted to dance on the graves of a few people who made me unhappy. It's a pretty infantile way to go through life. I'll show them, but I've done it, and I've gotten more than I ever dreamed of. So this guy wanted to dance, according to him, wanted to dance on the graves of the people who said he couldn't do it, and that motivated him to win 2 Oscars. That sounds tremendous in one way, professionally, but not in his personal life. Turned out to be an alcoholic, very depressed person. Wheels fell off in his personal life, so I'm not advising that you use allodoxophobia to that degree. But that made me wonder, well, if Anthony Hopkins did that, what has driven other high super achievers like him in every field? So I started to study that. This was maybe 25 years ago. I studied arguably the 500 highest achievers of all time in every field: education, acting, sports, healthcare. All the Canadian prime ministers, I threw them into the 500. All the American presidents, I threw them into the 500. I tried to go into it not with confirmation bias to look for Anthony Hopkins along the way, but I couldn't help but bump into them because I found two trends among these 500 super achievers, two trends which stuck out to me. One was obviously they were highly motivated and single-minded. You don't get to the top by being a well-balanced, happy, nice guy. It just doesn't work. In fact, I think the most powerful person in history to this point, maybe to 25 years ago, because women now are gaining more power. To that point, when I was doing that study, the most powerful person in history was the missing father. Because in these 500 people, the missing father was all over the place. Almost all the explorers had a missing father. I don't want to generalize and make it a cliche, but I've got to put some credence to it. All the founders of the major religions all had a missing father. As a cheap psychologist, pop psychologist, I could say, well, they're trying to replace the missing father by searching, finding something. I don't know if that's the reason, but I can't ignore the fact that most of these 500 high achievers had what you'd call come from a dysfunctional home life. I think what happened was they learned to fight when they were young, because obviously most people who come from a dysfunctional home turn out not so good. They turn out on the street, nothing in their professional lives. They're on Young Street begging for pennies, sadly. But this one small segment of people who came from a dysfunctional home and had the missing father, to that point in time, they found a way to find love. And how did they find love and acceptance? Because they had something to give. They found they had a profession. When they were young, they were good at singing. Oh my God, they're a good golfer. Tiger Woods' father put him in he was so good when he was 3 years old swinging a golf club. And it was before he could walk. He put him in a harness in the garage. He could swing a golf club before he could walk. Tiger Woods. So don't judge Tiger Woods when he gets in problem with his social life. But my point is, people when they're young, they find something they're good at, and if they have pushy parents, stage parents, they work on what they're doing, and as they go along, they keep improving. And as they go along, what's happening? People are applauding them for it. So they keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So here's how they find their love. Get to the top. Meanwhile, they're climbing over the backs of other people to get to the top. You don't want your sons to do this. You don't want your sons to. Happy people, sadly, do not make the Hall of Fame. You can go and study any Hall of Fame you want. In medicine up at St. Mike's, Hockey Hall of Fame, Wayne Gretzky seemed like, I think there was 3% of the 500 people that I studied who had what you would call a pretty good home life. But Walter Gretzky was out there when Wayne was 2 years old, getting him to skate around the pylons. Okay, Wayne Gretzky liked hockey, so I'll give him that. And I included him and Michael Jordan in the 3% of the people who didn't have the missing father thing. But still, there's something there. When you push a kid into something and keep pushing him when he's 3 years old, what's he going to do? He's either going to love hockey and love the father or hate him later on. Guys like Gretzky were so good, wow. But there's something under the surface of these guys. Wayne Gretzky was a guy in hockey. I covered the sports for the Toronto Star. He never forgot a negative thing said about him in the press for years and years. One day he comes off the ice after a really good, exceptional game. Every game was exceptional for Wayne Gretzky. And he points at Bob McKenzie, who was a columnist. He says, "What do you think about that, Bob? Remember that story you did about me 2 years ago?" So, anger, revenge, blah, blah, blah. Super achievers, applaud them all you want, but don't expect them to be a role model, okay? Anyway, I could rant about this all day long. The 500 super achievers and what I call overcompensation. What they did is overcompensate for lack of love in their childhood. And as Anthony Hopkins said, it's a pretty infantile way to go through life. I'll show them, but he got more out of it than he ever dreamed. And he won the Oscar last year. I think it was about dementia. It was a movie about dementia or something. I think he won the second Oscar. He won the Oscar for Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. Okay, here's the line in the sand. I talked about when you're speeding up and you're jogging. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're in a work environment and you're a little bit worried about what other people think, it can motivate you. Try to do better than somebody else. That's okay, as long as you keep it in perspective. And here's the line in the sand. I've got almost a David Letterman list here, top 10. How to tell if you are defending your ego too much. And that's what we're talking about here, our ego. Number 1, you're defending yourself too much if you have a trophy room or a wall at home or you park your expensive car in your neighbor's face. Is that around here? Number 2, you take things personally. Okay, here's how we differ from the caveman. We take things personally where it's affecting our ego and our fight or flight system, our motivational signals kick in. I know a lot of people take things too personally and they've got a lot of stress in their lives. Most things are not personal, but some people take them. Number 3, you say aha a lot. Aha! I just like saying that word, there's not much to it. Aha! I knew it was you and not me. Number 4, if after accomplishment, you feel a sense of relief. If that's your first reaction after accomplishment, you feel a sense of relief, that's a red flag. Yeah, you just feel a sense of relief that you've had a goal and you've achieved it. That should not be the first reaction. You should have some joy, satisfaction. But when you feel a sense of relief first, you're feeling, oh my God, I've done it. They're not going to talk about me. They love me. Number 5, if you always follow trends and styles, you're defending yourself too much. If you think others are always scrutinizing you, it's like what I call the spotlight effect. If you constantly put others down or talk over others. If you get so irritated with others, hair stands on your neck. Well, here comes Mr. Caveman again. Do you know why your hair, we don't have much hair left anymore on the back. Do you know why in the original time your hair, caveman's hair, would stand up on the back of his neck? Any ideas on that? It'd make him look bigger in a fight. He came up against a rival. He didn't really want to fight, but he wanted to show the guy he wasn't backing down, so the hair would stand up on the back of his neck. It would make him look bigger. So that happens now when we go into a movie theater and we're watching a scary movie. You feel yourself tingling? That's in the area where your hairs come up on the back of your neck. You want to fight or run away from this thing. And here we are, and we're talking about a social or ego situation, and the hair is standing up on the back of your neck. So that's one of the red flags. If you lay awake at night counting the clients who might not like you rather than counting sheep. Remember the old days we used to count sheep to go to sleep? Number 10, and this is the big one. How to tell if you're defending yourself too much if you're always trying to prove yourself through your work. We're more than that, aren't we? I'm more than a cheap talker or a cheap writer. I'm a father, a grandfather. There's more to me than my work. Sadly, in the old days, especially with men, our identity was way too much wrapped up in our work. That's why a guy like my uncle, Gordon, worked at Fleet 20 years ago, I guess, died 2 years after he retired. His identity was wrapped up in what he did, and when he wasn't working anymore, what was he? Any questions or ideas about that? That's one of my bugaboos. I think I'm going to write a whole book about that, the missing father. That's not so much the case these days because our society's become more complex. The father-mother roles have changed in the house. I'm not sure we can really put our finger on anything, point our finger to anything on why if that person overcompensated. So, but I think to me it's a very interesting topic. Strategy 2: put our worries into perspective. Do you control your mind? Does it control you? And if we talk again in terms of our computer being a brain, I think we can talk about folders. The folders we have in our word system there. We have the whole healthy worries to deal with immediately. Remember the 8% I talked about? We have 44,000 worries. Only 8% are things we can control. So healthy worries we have to deal with. The B list, B folder in our mind should be the to-do folder. Worries or stresses we can do. We don't have to do right away. We can put them on the back burner. And the C folder, which is the hugest folder of all the delete trash, because most of these worries, we're going to throw them out. Something we have no control over. There actually is a worry. I've talked about the downsides to worry, but there's benefits to worry as well. Really, when you think about it, the flip side is there any more important resource we have than worry? Without worry, we actually would not have overcome the fear of your thing blowing away. Fear of my clip. I should have stapled that and clipped it. And I didn't prepare. I didn't put my fear into preparation. Otherwise, I would have clipped this together. That's a pretty good segue, isn't it? Yeah. Fear of fire, fear of predators, fear of drought and starvation. We would not have overcome that if we hadn't worried. We would not have taken over the world. Sadly, we take over the world too much now from animals if we hadn't planned ahead. So in the business world, if we hadn't worried, planned ahead, we would have had a fear of competitors. We wouldn't have overcome our fear of them. Constant changes and transitions, issues of real estate and clients' problems. That must have been for a group I was talking to. I should have eliminated that. Effective worry is called planning. It motivates us to prepare for changes and work on our skills. It gives us satisfaction in achievement. People who never worry never get anything done. Now, we can say the same about people who worry too much, because people who worry too much never get anything done. The trick is to put our worries in perspective, figure out the 8%, which are things we can control, and act on them. Worries for the to-do folder. Fear of flying. Let's say you have a fear of spiders or, I don't know, mice, I guess. But you don't go up to the cottage. There's a lot of spiders and mice in the cottage. You don't have to worry about that. You don't even have to put it on a to-do folder. There's certain fears and phobias you don't even have to worry about. Worry about things that are coming to your everyday life. Fear of flying, if you've got to fly. Fear of heights and swimming. Do they affect your life now? If you must deal with them, simply showing up. Woody Allen once said, 80% of life is showing up. I worry about going to the doctor sometimes. I worry about it for months. Cortisol drip, drip, drip for months. I get into the doctor's examination. There's hardly anything to it. What did I spend all that time worrying about it for? So, showing up to events, showing up to public speaking, you're worried about it all the time. Yeah, you put your fear into preparation. Once you show up, you think, what was I worried about? I'm ready for this. So, show up. Worries, again, worries for the to-do folder. What others think about you? Does it affect you, or you should have some control over it? What to tell your kids and when about things like sex and violence. Obviously, that's for the parent to decide when and when you do it. That's for the to-do folder and the time and place for that. Now we get to the trash. I got this picture here. If I had my PowerPoint. Alfred E. Newman, What Me Worry. You guys heard about Mad Magazine? Hear what I say about Alfred E. Newman. Don't always believe what you think. Sounds crazy, huh? Don't always believe what you think. I think when we become around 30 years old, we start replaying tapes in our head of what our parents have drummed into us. We got to challenge that. Again, United Church people bring up United Church people. Atheists bring up atheists. Conservatives bring up conservatives, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with telling your kid what you think. I think there's a thing called brainwashing. I think you want to bring up your children to think for themselves in the end. That's a delicate balance, isn't it, when you're a parent? But I will give that to my parents. I think they brought me up at the end of the day to make my own decisions when I got older, and I thank them for that. Anyway, don't always believe what you think, because most of these thoughts, most of these worries are dumber than a bag of hammers. Most of them are. We see too many things as threats. Every day we see too many little things as threats. Of the 44,000 little tiny worries we have, these are not worries we take to the horizon. We just react negatively to a lot of things. Of these 44,000 worries we have, 40% of them are totally unjustified. Things we have no control over whatsoever. 30% are things which occurred in the past. Or sometimes worry about what happened in the past. Geez, I wish I'd had better teachers or better parents. And throw them out. 22% are miscellaneous and needless health concerns. We have a little pain. Oh my God, it's COVID. Even before COVID came along, when we had a little pain, we have the extreme worries. It's got to be this. We got to have this checked out. Most of them are just nothing. They're just a little stress blip. It's a piece of cheese we ate. 8%. Only 8% of these worries we have every day are things we should act on, things we have some influence over. You've got to distinguish the real from the phony threats. Sometimes it's simple as writing things down. You're worried about something coming up in the next week. Are my worries about that legitimate? Sometimes when you talk to another person about it, you bounce it off somebody else, and they come back with observations. Oh yeah, I think I was worried too much about that. You're right. Sometimes writing things down. You write things down overnight, and you pick up it in the morning, you look at it. You know what? My thinking was about worrying was kind of skewed. It puts things into perspective. And that's why I say about worrying in pairs. Worrying with somebody else who you trust, who you respect. Worry in pairs. Another big thing about worry and stress, managing the stress and worry in our lives, is our support systems. I think we've done pretty well with that with COVID. And what I say about this is these big things, we're all in this together. And once we realize we're all in this together, I think it makes the worrisome situations seem more manageable, seem more, cope more. And in a little broader sense, the more connected you feel to groups, the less vulnerable you feel. Family and friends, spending time together, listening to each other, realizing that we all have pretty much have the same needs and fears and worries. Historical, Patrick, here's your chance. Research your country's history, your regions and your own. Know how you belong to a movement greater than your own life. Spiritual, develop a connectedness beyond the physical. Learn to love more. There's too much hate out there in this climate today. Not enough love. Information and ideas. Reading books, magazines, and again, this must be an old one because I got the internet down there. There are some safe internet sites, ones you trust, ones that are more balanced, but you have to make that decision. And in that light, get reassurance that the world of information and ideas is supposedly there to help you and not to hurt you. We're all in this together, connected to work and organizations. The more connected you feel to your work, the better job you will do, and you will get more satisfaction and less worry. Now here's, maybe you guys agree with this or not, but I worry more at night. You guys worry more at night? You lay in bed and, I don't know, maybe that's specific to me, but I find my perception is not as balanced at night, one reason or another. And I wake in the morning and I'm thinking, well, boy, I really put that out of perspective last night. If that's the case in general, I'm finding with a lot of people it is. Why do we worry more at night? And I think why often it's worse is that we're tired and our resources are down. And that affects our thinking, I think, a lot. Darkness. It's related to uncertainty. It's like caveman, fear of the unknown. Caveman was fear of the dark because he didn't know what was going to come out of the woods at night. And we still have that fear of the unknown. It's not necessarily related to darkness, but it's a fear of what might happen in, the text that's going to come tomorrow from the boss, or, we're working from home and we're worried about, is our success rate what it should be? What do people think about us? Fear of the unknown. You're on your back in bed, unable to take action. Suggestions: if you worry too much at night, hold off on the caffeine. The caffeine will make your fight or flight system a little more electric. In other words, if you have too much caffeine, your adrenaline system will be too much on alert. It can help you. In fact, in the Olympics, there's a limit of you can only have 2.5 cups of coffee a day. I don't know how they measure that in caffeine for the Olympics, because it can stretch your adrenaline system. But when you're laying awake at night and you don't want to lay there worrying, and you're wide awake and your adrenaline system is stretched, you don't want that. No caffeine. What works for me is if I'm tense before I go to bed, I have a hot bath. I find a hot bath, my tension, my stress goes to my shoulders. If I don't exercise enough. When I have a bath as hot as I can stand it, it seems like a really a real massage, and I feel a lot better when I come out of it. What I tend to do when I worry at night is I think about the things I have, not about the things I don't have. You think about the things you don't have, the things you about to have, and I think your worry system is going to kick in too much. Somebody's waving.
My husband, he's just checking on me.
So that, what's that? What was that? Was it a thumbs up?
I said my husband's just checking on me.
Oh, okay. Oh boy.
He was worried.
He was worried. That's a good one. Stephanie, you're taking my laughs away. It was worth it. Okay, let's talk about serious worries. We talk about everyday worries, and there's nothing. I'm not minimizing everyday worries. Really serious worries: illness, tragedy, loss of a job. These are serious worries. So, I thought, where do I go? I've had serious worries in my life, but where do I go to get some observations, feedback about serious worries? I went to this guy in Toronto, George Chuvalo. He was a boxer in the 1960s and 70s. He was a Canadian champion. Muhammad Ali couldn't knock him down. This guy he was a tremendous boxer. That's only one side of the story. That's not what I asked him about. His personal life was insanely bad. 3 of his sons died from drug overdoses. His wife died young. I thought, how does this guy cope? How does he go on living? So I went and talked to him. And I boiled it down, paraphrasing him, how he has coped with it. And he's still alive. I think he's got a bit of dementia now. So there's been some stories about him where he's acted maybe inappropriately, but I'm going to get this anecdote out of the way quickly. That happened also here with Howie Triano. Howie Triano was a bedrock of the Niagara Falls community. He was an educator. He was an athlete. He played for Canada. He was captain for Canada's national basketball team. His son is Jay Triano, who coached the Raptors. And he had a stroke and he had some dementia, and there was some stories about him. He did something inappropriately. Niagara Falls Review, when he died, they didn't even do a story about him. There wasn't even an obit about him. It was horrible. How we can do that's another issue about society I'll deal with another time. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is what George Chuvalo told me that day still holds water. It has nothing to do with what happened to him since his dementia got into other problems. And what he told me that day was how he dealt with his serious worries. I think it's appropriate to us. He said, a big worry, and he had big worries, is only a part of your life. You have other issues, people, and responsibilities besides that big worry of what's going on. Number 2, if you don't share your trouble, the big worry, you don't give the person who loves you a chance to love you enough. And thirdly, he said, suffering is a chance for self-discovery, to develop courage and to raise your anxiety threshold. And there are some people who've gone through hell with COVID, and somehow they took those 3 things to heart and they come out of it golden. So anyway, those are the strategies to try to use to try to cope with and manage with worry. There's another strategy is use it or lose it. We can actually use our fear and our stress. You've heard the stories of the little old lady, albeit they're anecdotal. The grandkid is stuck under the car. The old woman runs out and picks the car up. How does she do it? That happens. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. How'd that happen? It happened like the cops did. The fight or flight system, the blood leaving the small muscles. And yeah, the woman may have broken her arm later on, but nature gave her at that moment the power and the resources to lift up that car off her grandkid. So it does happen. So in some instances, you can say, as I say it, you can say yes to the stress. But first of all, let's talk about the signs of stress. We're not talking about 5 out of 5. That's a 5 out of 5 fight or flight response. Lifting the car up, shooting that guy between the eyes because it helped you focus. And in that moment, nature did give those cops time to focus. Here's the signs you're having stress, one or another. And everybody's symptoms, as I mentioned earlier, are different. Everybody reacts differently to fight or flight situations. Your speech or work patterns speed up. You can often see this in work colleagues, and you don't necessarily see it in yourself. So that's why you should have the buddy system. When I covered golf, the caddy's big responsibility with the golfer was to notice when the golfer was getting nervous. When the golfer got nervous, he or she may not notice it. The caddy was there. So look for signs in this in other people and in yourself. Often we don't see it in ourselves. Signs of stress. Again, concentration or decision making can deteriorate when you're under stress. You get irritable, you get depressed, You can have a lack of motivation, sort of the opposite. There is a change in patterns of your behavior. Your sick days are used up by November. That's how you can tell if you are stressed out. You talk to your computer, and some days it talks back. These are supposed to be funny, by the way. Your spouse knows the names of all your coworkers. That's a red flag. How are we doing for time, Julie?
1 hour.
1 hour.
Now we're in. Okay. Let's talk a little bit. You guys work from home? Have you worked from home at all?
A little bit.
Okay. A lot of people with COVID have. I'll just go through it quickly. I mean, work is really in our society is invaded home. So then you've got stress coming from all sides. You've got kids or grandkids running around in the back. You've got a spouse who wants something. The grass has got to be cutting, all this stuff. I'll just go through some of these quickly. They're obvious. They're cliche. Separating your workspace by room or dividers. Keeping work hours within your traditional work hours, if that's possible. I gave a talk to real estate agents last week, and Michael, we're on call 24/7. We're going to get called in the middle of the night. Somebody, house has gone down. Doesn't always apply. Start work early while your energy levels are up. Try to limit distractions around your house. A strict schedule should include everyone in the house: spouse, children, and pugs, because they have needs too. Go through this quickly. Kids at home. Working with kids at home. Schedule your day with them. Manage technology. You limit your screen time and your phone time. Watch out for stress reactions in your children. Here's a great quote from a psychologist, Dr. Jody Carrington. Every time you think of calling a kid attention-seeking this year, consider changing it to connection-seeking and see how your perspective changes. Yes, I disagree a little bit because there are some kids out there who are just attention-seeking, but I think, as she is right, there are some who just want to connect. So change that to connection seeking. And I think a benefit of working at home is spending time and dealing with crisis together that can bond a family. Go through this quickly. Learning to compartmentalize. We can use this every day, right? There's all kinds of stresses around us. Compartmentalizing. The man who could compartmentalize better than anybody I've ever known was a pianist in the 1950s. He was the best pianist in the whole world. He lived in Toronto. His name was Glenn Gould. He was a real eccentric guy. This guy could compartmentalize to the point that 25 years after his death, the publicists, the media, always were after him about his personal life. Nobody knew 25 years after his death whether he was gay, he was asexual, he was heterosexual. He kept his life so private. I wrote a book 25 years after death called The Secret Life of Glenn Gould. I found all these girlfriends he had. He had like 24 girlfriends. The point was, he compartmentalized them to the degree that one didn't know about the other one. And he kept that apart from his work. So that, in an extreme sense, how to separate things in our lives. And when you're talking about working from home and compartmentalizing, not only schedule, but visualize what you want your work day to be and see yourself logging off at the end of the day. Let go of the issues, both at work and home, that you cannot influence. At the end of the day, if possible, leave your office space and don't return. Remember what it was like when you worked at the office and didn't want to bring your work home. Try not to respond to emails after hours, not always possible. Be emotionally intelligent. Don't let your emotions from work spill into your home life. Again, easier said than done. Using your stress, I call it hyperflow. As the cops did, as athletes do, they have learned to use their hormones at the right moment. In fact, athletes use controlled anger in very small components. If you keep anger in your system for more than 2 or 3 seconds, it's like what Buddha said. You keep anger in your system, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You're angry at somebody, you want revenge, stay angry for them a little while. It's like drinking poison, expecting them to die, and it's you who's the one who suffers. So when I talk about anger, I have to qualify that. What I'm talking about here is anger used in small doses. It can actually sharpen. It can sharpen your adrenaline. It can sharpen your response because it sends it into your system. What was that?
Guy's car.
Oh, okay.
He was dragging something.
On that Note, when you're in a road rage situation, Patrick, you can actually focus better. So that guy came right on cue. You ever notice that? If you get really mad, for briefly, your focus can be somehow better. Well, athletes have learned to train that. In fact, my first book, it's 25 years ago now, was called Competitive Fire. And that's what I studied. I studied athletes and found that in almost all the top instances. Is that all right, Patrick? Are you the backup security, by the way? Because I noticed Shelley didn't go out there. Is your car back there or something? You didn't see it, right? Okay, sorry. I haven't used my glasses yet. In almost all these super athletic performances, there is a component of anger. I challenge you to find me one that's not. And this, again, this is old. This was 25 years ago I wrote this book. So these are old examples, but I have an example from yesterday, and I will tell you at the end. Jack Nicklaus, the golfer. Okay, he won the Masters in 1986 at, I think he was 46 years old. He was angry at the media for saying he was too old to win. On that week in the Masters, he had on his fridge with a magnet all the media, stories about the media who said he was too old. I'll show them, just like Anthony Hopkins. Again, just one component, he won the Masters at age 46. Wilt Chamberlain, basketball player from the past, he scored 100 points in a game. Nobody's gotten even Kobe Bryant, LeBron James haven't even come close to that. Why did he do it? One of the components, he was mad at the media. Again, angry at saying he was too slow in the media and he lacked stamina. Well, I'll show them. And he went out and scored 100 points. Babe Ruth, cliche guy, furious at an opposing pitcher and fans for pelting him with fruit and insults, he pointed to the pitcher and said, "The next pitch is going over the fence." What happened? He hit the next pitch over the fence. So again, anger, dopamine. Okay, here's a slight sideshow here. You talk about adrenaline. If you get too much adrenaline in your system in fight or flight, it's actually a cliche, it's a bad cliche. You get too much adrenaline in your system, you choke under pressure. The only benefit of that is the rabbit has too much adrenaline because he cannot outrun the lion. He gets too much adrenaline in the system, and the lion can't hear him, can't see him. Everything shuts down in that rabbit because he knows he can't outrun the lion. So in that case, the adrenaline is to his advantage. In our cases, we get too much adrenaline in our system. We're too worried about something. We seize up. We choke under pressure. I had that once in Los Angeles when Magic Johnson came back from AIDS. His first came back, there was reporters from all over the world in this little press box, and it's 1 o'clock out east, and I'm choking under pressure. I'm trying to write my story, and Clarkson, the Toronto Star paid $3,000 for you to come here, and you're going to blow it? In that moment, I got mad at myself. And in that brief moment, suddenly, like the cops, I started seeing things going slower. And it gave me more room and time to get my story ready, do the interviews, and I got my story in. That's my little example of that. But when you can control your hormones, it's a very difficult thing. I spent decades looking at this. How can I use my adrenaline to my advantage, not just to stop my choking? And I found it in 2 or 3 areas, and I used it in my own career. One time, I was in Pennsylvania playing in a basketball tournament. The coach wouldn't play me, and I was one of the better players. I got so pissed off on the bench. What's going to happen when I get in the game? But I was able to control it. When I got in the game, I was just on fire. I actually won the game by scoring point after point. Again, I was a good shooter, but that little component of anger, I was able to use that in a controlled sense, and it sent me over the top. I'm not advising you to use anger again liberally, like I talked about earlier, but don't dismiss it. It's there. It's there when the little old lady picks up the, who knows what was in her mind. Obviously, she wanted to save her granddaughter. But anyway, I call that hyperflow, and we can use that. And I think we've all had instances of that in small doses where we perform better under pressure. And most people don't perform better under pressure. Most golfers are good until the last day in the week. And Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods knew that. They knew if they could get to Sunday and they were still ahead, the last day of the week, most golfers perform worse under pressure. And so they just maintained their balance on the last day of the tournament. In fact, there was a case yesterday. Bring this up to date. I don't usually watch golf anymore, but okay, there was a big tournament. You're coming down to the last few holes, in the United States, and there's two guys left. One guy's called Bryson DeChambeau, and the other guy was Patrick Cantley. They're both kind of big players. It's a big shot. Bryson DeChambeau, he knows the cameras are on him. He's playing with Patrick. All of a sudden, he says, "Patrick, you're in my line of view. Stop walking." You don't diss somebody in front of 50 million viewers. At that moment, Patrick Cantley, he stopped walking. He shut up. What happened to him? He focused that anger. He's not as good a golfer as DeChambeau. For the next 5 holes, he hit these unbelievable putts. He focused one after the other. The announcer was saying, "What's happening? How can this be possible?"
Yeah.
He keeps sinking these putts. I knew damn well he told a reporter after. I was pissed off. He outed me in public like that, and I was going to show him. But again, not for everybody, but it happens. Most of the time, however, we feel challenges and stress. We're not super athletes. Most of the time, we just need to come down. Okay, we just need to let go, diffuse it, don't use it. And a lot of the ways we use it are global. Exercise. You feel stressed out in the middle of the day, your body is asking for a physical response. So you give it to it. If you can, give it to it. I was a runner. Until 58, I played soccer, and I found that a tremendous, in basketball, tremendous stress reliever. I felt stressed out. My body is asking, "Clarkson, what are you doing? Let's go. Get rid of this dopamine and the adrenaline and all that stuff." Don't you find that when you come back from exercising, thank God I pushed myself to do that, you feel much more relaxed. Music, I find, is another stress reliever. You guys find that? Again, it depends. Everybody's got different music. I don't want to tell people to listen to Shangri-La sung by a crooner today, and I asked my son, "What are you going to do when you're 80 years old, sitting around the campfire? Are you going to sing heavy metal music?" But I can't tell him that because he relaxes with heavy metal music. So anyway, just checking that time here. Wow, 10:08. Most of the time we need to come down. Just let go. It's easier said than done. The value of a laugh, I think we've got to remember that. The laugh, it diffuses a lot of bad things going on in your body. Hello. I often point to my granddaughter anyway. What does laughter do? It releases soothing hormones, endorphins and serotonin. Remember I talked about serotonin? It lowers your blood pressure, forces you to breathe deeply, relaxes muscles, boosts immune functions, and induces a feeling of happiness. Encourages a sense of perspective, hope, and control. Children laugh 400 times a day. How many times a day do you think adults laugh? Studies show 15. What happens? Well, a lot of it's responsibility. I know kids are laughing at us. We get all the responsibility. But here's a great quote from a psychologist, Lila Green, who gives seminars on humor to companies. She says, "We all start life with a sense of humor, but it gets knocked out of us. The messages we get are, wipe that smile off your face, or act your age, or don't laugh in church. And we all separate learning and work and play too much. We all separate learning and work and play too much." I think I'm going to end on that note because we just don't laugh enough. We take things, I know there's a lot of seriousness, we have a lot of responsibilities, but we take life far too seriously. And Jennifer, my wife, says, if I don't guffaw, which is a loud laugh at least 3 times a day, there's something wrong. So anyway, we're almost out of time, but I'm open for questions now. I can't have covered it all.
I heard something really cute the other day, okay? The young guy, he's in counseling, and he was talking about fear. And he wrote the letters, F-E-A-R. Fear everything and run. Or face everything and rise.
Everything and
Rise.
yeah. Fear, yeah. Everything and rise, yeah.
I thought that was
Yeah, I think that's very good. In general sense, that's good. There are some things you got to run from, but again, in our society right now, they're pretty small, and if it's fearful, you put your fear into your preparation. But yeah, that's a great quote.
And I liked what you said about everybody's brain working differently.
Yes.
That is so true. I was looking at the door of this house, and I was thinking, now, if my son were here right now, he would say, "Door looks closed, but is it really?"
Door looks closed.
It looks closed, but it is. His eyes would tell him one thing,
Okay.
but his brain will say, "But is it really?" He has OCD.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes it even
You'll
more
look at
complex.
the door and you'll say, it looks locked,
Yeah,
but is it really?
yeah.
Everybody's brain works different.
If we have time, I can read you my next op-ed piece. It's related to this. Do you have time? Do you want to listen to it?
Sure.
It's about American politics.
Okay.
The conservatives here. It's not. It's actually. I'm going to run this past you because I just wrote it. I'm hoping to get this in the New York Times
That would be wonderful.
op-ed piece. It's almost impossible. Not get into the New York Times, but it's impossible. Of what I'm going to say. Still got quick reflexes. See that? Canadians' quick fixes for easing America's polarization. How do you get Democrats and Republicans together? I'm going to try here. And a lot of it's now. Some of it's got to do with some things I've said already. Anyway, this is part of a larger book. I'm writing a fiction novel. It's about this subject. It's about a guy like me, I guess, who built a fort in his backyard. But he's American. His wife he's liberal. He votes Democrat, but his wife has become far left. He goes and makes a fort in the woods because he can't handle the stress of society anymore. And the United States is polarized. You can hardly get anything done in the government because of this. So in my book, he eventually meets militia guys. He tries not to give away his left leaning because he wants to try to understand them. Okay, so that's what the book's about. But I'm boiling it down into this op-ed piece. Okay, here we go. As a Canadian, I'm distressed to see the mother of all battles engaged by my neighbors to the south. Polarization among politicians and the public. Racism and prejudice are hot topics in the United States, particularly involving Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals who are showing extreme bias and even hatred towards one another. I have some friendly advice. Good luck, but I'm going to give it anyway. Don't always believe what you think. Seek out news from sources that don't merely confirm your views. This is directed, of course, at Americans, right? We can probably adhere to some of this because our elections are coming up. Seek out news from sources that don't merely confirm your views. You can be unconsciously manipulated or at least become more embedded in your thinking through so-called mainstream media and extreme groups which can influence them. Stop watching only MSNBC or Fox and media which are sympathetic, at times cheerleaders to your way of thinking. Stop fighting in the arena of social, often anti-social media. If you can't resist replying to political posts on Facebook or Twitter, deactivate your accounts. You're turning family and friends against one another. And YouTube can tend to cement your opinions with algorithms of things you already believe in. Number 2, be emotionally intelligent. Balance emotions with logic, opinions with facts. Don't allow hate to become a major motivator, outweighing love and concern for others. Studies show that dislike and sometimes outright hatred for opposing political party now outweighs affection for one's own party. Isn't that a sad indictment? Are you satisfied by simply being part of a tribe with group identity? If not, stop letting your emotions and tribal instincts run your lives. Whatever happened to individualism and thinking for yourself? Conservatives, stop dwelling nostalgic about the past. America has changed in ways drastically. Liberals, amend the past rather than try to angrily wipe it out by indiscriminately tearing down statues of notables from other areas when behaving and mindsets were different. That is a complex topic within itself because there's various levels of what you hold people to in the past. Ryerson is one of them, Ryerson University. They just dumped the name because they found out he was involved with not only residential schools, but he didn't want education for women on a higher level. So that's not exactly in tune with tearing down a statue of Kate Smith because she sang some song 50 years ago, which may have had some racial lines. So it's more complex than I'm making that. Next point, suspend your passion for a moment. During the discussion with someone with opposing views, don't let your adrenaline for a cause overwhelm your chance to learn something and to understand another viewpoint. You do it with your children at work. We do it all the time. We try to listen to other people. We just, for one reason or another, with political liberals, conservatives, sometimes we get our backs up too much. We don't hear what the other person is saying. We don't learn anything from it. Acknowledge your differences. Along with global society, your country is more complex than ever. These days, Democrats are increasingly people of color, live in cities, and are less religious than Republicans, who are overwhelmingly white, Christian, and live in rural areas. Artsy versus traditional may be a sweeping generalization, but it has some truth. Conservatives, here we are again, tend to have larger and more active right amygdalae. Never get that right. An area of the brain associated with expressing and processing fear. They don't like change and have a greater need to feel safe. Democrats tend to seek new experience and to be logical and understanding facts over emotional options. Stop making everything political. Stop using issues of the day, such as COVID, as a political war cry. It's a health issue. In fact, healthcare, climate change, the economy, criminal justice, racism are real threats which affect you all before they get into the House of Commons or the Senate. The means by which they are addressed through government is something else to discuss. Go 48 hours without using Biden or Trump Nation in any context. Bite your lips. That's hard for me to do. I'll talk about Donald Trump. Quid pro quo. We've heard that before. Compromise for mutual benefit. Cut back on your ranting and work on your listening skills. Stop thinking as the other group as the other. They're Americans too. In general, they are not as extreme or stereotyped as you think they are. With the government sometimes bordering on gridlock, give and take with issues. While there may be no compromise, and there is no compromise on some principles and issues, isn't there not? I won't compromise on some things, but with others there are. Some of your principles, consider someone else's point of view, seek out friends who you respect but disagree with you. You both might learn something. Republicans, be more curious about others in the world. Just 9% of scientists are from your party. That's something right there. 9% of scientists are Republicans. That tells you generally they're not as curious about the world as Democrats. Democrats, don't censure people and professors who don't agree with you. And don't dismiss all the bedrocks of lifestyle which have established America since 1776. Both sides should consider appearing together on Dr. Phil or Ellen. That'll work. Or go to Fenway Park together and all sing the verses of Sweet Caroline. Have hats mass-produced saying, make America civil again. Find a common foe. You are more united when you had a like enemy. Communists during the Cold War and the Olympic Games. ISIS after 2001 and Taliban in Afghanistan. Declare war on somebody. France, they've always detested your lack of culture. China's too easy. Remember that we Canadians burned down the White House in 1812. I don't want them coming this way, it's a joke. You're still a good country with powerful influence and nice people, but the world already has 195 nations. Let's not make it 196 with a civil war. Anyway, do as I advise, not as we Canadians necessarily do. One of our 5 political parties, the Bloc Québécois, has a mandate to become sovereign and remove the province of Quebec from the rest of our country. All nations can learn and move forward if their citizens have the will and compassion for one another. Just saying. That's it.
Michael is really brilliant. Sadly, they've been quite successful in the United States at dumbing down a large proportion of the population.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Facebook, Twitter, dumbing down of the media. Oh yeah, I agree with that totally. What happened to science? Yeah. But wrestling is real. Anyway, thanks for coming out. COVID times, I appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you, as always, for coming and speaking on the porch. Fascinating. I really appreciate it. So can we just all thank Michael for coming out tonight? And I want to thank everybody that came. There are some cookies over here, water, help yourself. I do have a donation jar if you feel inclined to throw a couple of bucks in for a speaker. And our last Stories from the Porch is actually Wednesday night, same time, same place. We have a very short season this summer, so just a couple. But next summer, we're hoping to be back with a full lineup. So thank you again. I hope everybody has a great night. Feel free to stick around for a bit, and we'll chat.
Thank you, Shelley and Will, for having this venue, wonderful venue.